When the president addresses the American people and Congress live tomorrow night in primetime, as we know, he'll be speaking to a war-weary and skeptical audience. But our next guest says winning them over will not be the main goal. And this is coming from a man who knows a lot about these things. And the guest spot today is Michael Waldman, who was head of speechwriting in the Clinton White House. Welcome, Michael. It's great to have you here. So if it is not about persuading the American people or about persuading Congress, what does the president hope to accomplish tomorrow night?
Well, there's an idea that somehow in the past, a president would go and give an Oval Office address and suddenly public opinion would turn and there would be thousands of telegrams flooding into Congress saying, you know what, we've changed our mind. We want to take this military action. You know,
that's not going to happen?
Well, Richard Nixon used to give these speeches on Vietnam. There would be all these telegrams, and we found out much later the telegrams were fake. They'd been generated by the White House. The American public is always very skittish about military action. President George W. Bush really didn't persuade people to support going into Iraq until after our troops were already in harm's way. What the president can do, though, what he has not yet done, is lay out in an intellectually clear way why this would be necessary, why chemical weapons are so different that we have to step in, as he would say, what the goal is, and what could possibly come of it. In a way, it's to give members of Congress who might think this is the right thing to do, but know that they're getting tremendous heat from their constituents, some cover.
Right.
It's not that it's going to suddenly turn public opinion. That didn't even happen in the past and certainly isn't going to, I don't think, likely to happen right now.
Well, and you mentioned the skittish public. Another time when the public was very skittish was before President Clinton took action in Kosovo. And he similarly, a lot of parallels have been drawn there, but he similarly made a big primetime address to try to move the public in support of intervention there. Tell us about, you were involved in that speech. Tell us about what was going on behind the scenes at that time.
So remember that this was after several years of warfare in what had been Yugoslavia, which broke up. And first there was the fighting between Serbia and ethnic cleansing in Bosnia. And then Kosovo was this province. And this actually is a good example. It took many months where the president started. He talked in the State of the Union address in early 1999. He got some support from NATO. Then he announced, not I'm asking Congress to authorize this,
right,
but he announced that he was doing it.
Right.
And then there was a considerable amount of public education that went all along. And while it happened, the House of Representatives voted against it. This kind of game playing happens all the time. Members of Congress might think something's a good idea, but they don't really want to be held accountable for it, or they might think it's a bad idea, but they have to go along anyway because it's the president of their own party. So the kinds of challenges the president is facing right now are not that unusual. What's a little bit unusual is kind of the narrative arc of this whole thing is a little mixed up. This was so sudden.
Yeah, Michael,
yes.
I want to ask you about that. You talk about the narrative, and what does he have to do then? I mean, given your experience here, does he simply have to lay out the fact that he believes in this and we should trust him as commander-in-chief, or does he go into a clear strategy and endgame?
I think, first of all, he does have to show with some passion and rigor why he thinks this is important. Yes, we don't want a trigger-happy commander-in-chief, but we don't want to follow an unclear trumpet either. I think that he can't be afraid to do what Susan Rice did today, which is to situate this not so much in instability in Syria, because, my goodness, we're all heartbroken in seeing 100,000 people perish already, but that there's something different about chemical weapons, something different about weapons of mass destruction, and explain in a way what has to happen. You know, with most of these military interventions, a leader, a president says, if the head of the other country doesn't do X, then we're going to invade. This is almost an after-the-fact criminal punishment being proposed for a really bad deed, and that's a little harder to explain. I'd like to know if A, then B, and what the limiting principle is, and I think that'll go far to possibly moving some of the skeptics.
You understand better than anyone what goes into writing these important speeches. Michael Waldman, thank you so much for joining us.